No matter where you are in the world, you know these two words, pandemic and a lockdown. You know them because we all have experienced that. But more and more people are asking one question. When is this pandemic going to be over? Excellent question. We keep going to lockdowns, going out of lockdowns, things are going well, oh well, let's go back to lockdowns. I understand, but before we cover this current pandemic, COVID-19, let's talk about the three major outbreaks of the plague in the history. The first one is called the Plague of Justinian, and it wiped out almost half of the population of the whole world back in the 6th century. The second one, and the most famous one, the most popular one, started in China in the 1300s, and it wiped out up to 1/3 of the population only in Europe. The last major outbreak of the plague started once again in China in the mid-1850s, and once again spread across the world. And how did those pandemics end? Experts aren't really sure, to be fair. Perhaps the plague ran out of victims or mutated into a less deadly form. Each of these outbreaks eventually did end. However, the disease is still around. In fact, it's still around today. The plague is spread amongst prairie dogs in the southwestern US, and from time to time, it even makes its way to humans. So how does a pandemic end? According to medical historians, a pandemic has two types of ending. One is a medical ending, and the other one is a social ending. Medical ending happens when it's impossible for the infection to find new victims. That can be when everyone is dead, or strict social distancing measures are in place, or people are immune or have been vaccinated. A social end to a pandemic doesn't mean that the disease is gone. It means that people have learned to live with it. A pandemic can end socially when people stop fearing the disease, had enough with the restrictions, and want to go back to their daily life. A great example of a social end of a pandemic is the Spanish flu outbreak in 1918. By the time World War I was over, people everywhere were sick of the war, death, and misery. They were willing to risk disease to return to normal life as soon as possible. Eventually, the virus mutated into a less deadly form of flu, and the pandemic slowly faded away. However, the disease is still around. The fact is, a pandemic doesn't end socially or medically. Both of these need to happen in order for a pandemic to be over. However, a medical ending is almost impossible. Smallpox is one of the rare examples of medical endings. The disease terrorized people for almost 3,000 years, but because symptoms were easy to recognize, people were quarantined earlier. Also, animals weren't affected, which meant that once humans were cured, the illness was defeated. But coming back to our pandemic, COVID-19, when and how will this pandemic end? The fact the outbreak affects different areas differently makes it difficult to say when the pandemic will be over. At some point, the World Health Organization will announce that the global pandemic has ended. However, most likely, some countries will still be fighting COVID-19. Medically, it doesn't seem like it's going to end soon. It takes some time to produce a vaccine, distribute it, and vaccinate everybody. Socially though, it seems like we're seeing the end of the tunnel, and there is a light over there. People are getting more and more frustrated with lockdown, social distancing, and quarantine measures. The economic and social impacts scare people more than the disease itself. Whatever happens, one thing is for sure, and that is that we'll be hearing about COVID-19 at least for a little longer. So please stay safe, but please, 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 please don't live your life in fear. Try to enjoy it.